While crossing an empty parking lot, a businessman at the peak of his career finds an injured girl hiding behind a pillar. Frightened and barefoot, she says she lost everything because of a bad man who builds buildings. Intrigued by the coincidence and the details she reveals, he begins to suspect there is something far too dark about this story. Unaware, he is about to discover that the monster who destroyed the child's life has his own face. Chapter 1. The Encounter *. Blake Harrington strode through the underground parking garage of Pinnacle Tower, Chicago's newest architectural marvel. His custom Italian loafers echoed against concrete as he twirled his car keys, still riding the high of closing the biggest deal of his career. At 42, Blake had just cemented his status as Chicago's most formidable real estate developer with the acquisition of the Riverside District, 30 acres of prime lakefront property, ripe for luxury development. The board meeting had run late, but Blake didn't mind. The champagne toasts, the congratulatory handshakes, and the knowledge that his company's stock would soar tomorrow morning made the hour worth every second. His phone vibrated with yet another congratulatory message, this time from Mayor Richardson himself. Blake smiled. Political connections were the lifeblood of real estate development, and he had cultivated his meticulously. As he approached his Tesla, a sound stopped him, something between a whimper and a cough. Blake paused, scanning the dimly lit corner of the garage. There it was again, coming from behind a concrete pillar. Probably a stray cat, he thought, ready to dismiss it, but some instinct made him walk closer. "Hello?" he called out, voice echoing in the cavernous space. No response. Blake approached cautiously, his hand hovering over his phone, ready to call security if necessary. When he rounded the pillar, what he saw made him freeze. A small girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, huddled against the wall. Her clothes were dirty, her feet bare and scraped. Dark hair hung limply around a pale face smudged with grime. When she looked up, her eyes widened with terror. She scrambled backward, pressing herself impossibly further into the corner. Hey, Blake said softly, immediately crouching down to appear less threatening. "I'm not going to hurt you. Are you lost?" The girl stared at him, trembling slightly. "Are you the building man?" she whispered. "The building man," Blake repeated, confused. "The bad man who takes houses away." Something uncomfortable shifted in Blake's chest. "No," he lied instinctively. "I just work here. My name is Blake. What's yours?" She hesitated, then mumbled, "Lily." "Lily. That's a pretty name." He glanced around. "Where's your mom or dad?" "Lily, how did you get down here?" "I'm waiting for Mommy. She works at night cleaning offices." Her voice was so small Blake had to strain to hear it. "She didn't come back. When did you last see her?" Lily's forehead wrinkled in concentration. 3 days ago? I'm not sure. The pretty house is gone now." Blake's stomach tightened. 3 days. This child had been alone for 3 days. "You've been here all that time?" She nodded, pulling her knees tighter to her chest. "I'm waiting for Mommy." Blake shrugged off his suit jacket and gently placed it around her shoulders. It swallowed her tiny frame completely. "You must be hungry. When did you last eat?" Lily pointed to a small backpack beside her. "I had crackers and water from the bathroom." Blake felt sick. He pulled out his phone, then hesitated. The logical thing would be to call the police or child services, but something about the fear in the girl's eyes made him pause. She needed immediate care, and bureaucracy would take time. "Listen, Lily, you need food and somewhere warm to sleep. I have an apartment not far from here. I can take you there, get you something to eat, and we can figure out how to find your mom. Would that be okay?" She looked at him skeptically. "Mom says not to go with strangers." "Your mom is right," Blake said. "That's very smart. But this is an emergency, and I promise I'm only trying to help." He pulled out his wallet and showed her his driver's license. "See, this is me, Blake Harrington. Now you know my name, where I live, and what I look like, and we can call the police from my place if you want." Asterisk Lily stared at the ID, then at Blake's face, making her own small calculations. Finally, hunger and exhaustion won over caution. She nodded. "Okay, let's get you warmed up." He stood slowly and offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her tiny palm in his asterisk. Blake led her to his car, opening the passenger door. He noticed her wince as she climbed in. "Your feet hurt?" Asterisk Lily nodded, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. "We'll clean them up when we get home." Asterisk. The drive to Blake's penthouse in the Gold Coast neighborhood was quiet. In his rear-view mirror, he watched Lily stare out the window at the glittering Chicago skyline. Her face reflected in the glass showed no awe at the spectacle, only exhaustion and worry far beyond her years. Asterisk. Blake Quotis building doorman did a double-take at the sight of Chicago's most notorious bachelor developer escorting a bedraggled child through the marble lobby, but Blake's stern look prevented any questions. Asterisk. In his penthouse, Blake immediately headed for the kitchen. "Grilled cheese, okay? It's about the only thing I know how to make." Asterisk Lily nodded, standing awkwardly in the center of his massive living room, still wrapped in his suit jacket. She seemed afraid to touch anything among the sleek, modern furniture and expensive art pieces. "Make yourself at home," Blake said, gesturing to the plush sofa. "The remote for the TV is on the coffee table if you want to watch something." Asterisk. While he prepared the sandwich, Blake called his personal physician, Dr. Whitman, explaining the situation and requesting a house call. The doctor, accustomed to Blake's generous compensation for inconvenient timing, agreed to come within the hour. Asterisk. After Lily had eaten and Dr. Whitman had treated her scrapes and cuts, finding nothing more serious, thankfully, Blake showed her to one of his 3 guest bedrooms. He found an old t-shirt she could use as a nightgown and promised to be just down the hall if she needed anything. "We'll find your mum tomorrow," he assured her as he turned off the light. "Try to get some sleep." Asterisk. Back in his living room, Blake poured himself a scotch and stared out at the Chicago skyline. Something about Lily's story nagged at him. The pretty house that was gone now. The bad man who takes houses away. Asterisk. Blake. Harrington was that man. His company, Harrington Developments, had transformed Chicago's urban landscape over the past decade. Slums and aging properties replaced with gleaming towers and upscale communities. He had created billions in value for investors, for the city's tax base, for himself. Asterisk. There were always relocations, of course. That was the nature of progress, but everything was done legally with proper compensation. His company had policies, procedures, people were taken care of, weren't they? Blake pulled out his phone and called Marcus Reed, his executive assistant. "Sir, is everything okay?" Marcus answered, clearly surprised by the late call. "I need you to pull some files for me," Blake said. "All the relocation and compensation records from the Riverside District acquisition and the Westbrook Commons project from 2 years ago." "Sir, that's thousands of documents. What exactly are you looking for?" Asterisk. Blake hesitated. "A woman, likely a single mother with a young daughter named Lily, probably working as an office cleaner. Now, they would have been relocated within the last 2 years. Asterisk. There was a pause on the line. "Sir, is this related to the investigation that Channel 7 is threatening?" "What investigation?" Asterisk. Another pause. "I thought you knew. Legal sent a brief this morning. Some reporter is digging into claims about unpaid relocation compensation from the Westbrook project. Nothing substantiated yet." Blake's grip tightened on his phone. "Get me those files first thing tomorrow and find out everything you can about that investigation." Asterisk. After hanging up, Blake returned to the guest room and quietly opened the door. Lily was fast asleep, her small body nearly lost, in the center of the king-sized bed. In sleep, the worry had melted from her face, leaving only the innocence of childhood. Asterisk. Blake felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest, something he hadn't experienced in the 20 years since he'd left behind his own humble beginnings in rural Indiana. Was it guilt? Responsibility? Whatever it was, he knew with sudden certainty that his life had irreversibly changed, The moment he'd spotted Lily behind that pillar dot asterisk tomorrow comma, he would find answers. About Lily's mother. About what had really happened with the relocations his company had handled. About the bad man who takes houses away. Asterisk. For tonight, though, all he could do was ensure that this one child was safe, warm and fed. The very basics that his company's policies supposedly guaranteed for everyone affected by their developments. Dot. Asterisk. As Blake gently closed the door, he wondered how many other Lilies might be out there, displaced by the empire he had built, with such single-minded determination. Dot. Asterisk. Chapter 2. The Connection. Asterisk. Blake awoke to the unfamiliar sound of cartoons playing in his living room. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't place the noise. Then memory flooded back, the parking garage, the little girl, the promise to help. He checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. Marcus wouldn't be in the office with those files for another hour at least. Dot. Asterisk. He found Lily cross-legged on his sofa, watching a children's show with solemn concentration. She'd already folded the blanket he'd given her last night and placed it neatly on the arm of the couch. The sight of such adult responsibility in a child so young struck Blake hard. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep okay?" Asterisk. Lily nodded. "Your house is very big." "Too big, probably," Blake admitted, heading to the kitchen. "How about some breakfast? I have cereal, or I could make eggs." "Cereal, please. Do you have—" "The kind with little marshmallows?" Asterisk. Blake had to smile. "Sorry, no marshmallows, but I have some with chocolate pieces." Asterisk. While Lily ate, Blake made coffee and considered his next move. "Lily, I need to ask you some questions about your mom and where you used to live. It might help us find her." Asterisk. She looked down at her cereal, pushing it around with her spoon. "Are you going to send me away?" "No," Blake said firmly, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "I promise to help, and I will, but we need to find your mom. She must be very worried." Lily's eyes welled up. "What if she doesn't want to find me?" "Hey," Blake said gently, moving to sit beside her. "Why would you think that?" "Because she was crying a lot. Because we had to move from our pretty house to the bad place where the ceiling leaks. Because she has to work all night and still doesn't have enough money." A tear splashed into her cereal bowl. "I heard her telling Miss Rodriguez that sometimes she wishes she could just disappear." Asterisk. Blake felt his throat tighten. Your mom didn't mean that, Lily. Parents say things sometimes when they're stressed, but it doesn't mean they don't love their children. I'm certain your mom is looking everywhere for you right now." Asterisk. His phone rang. Marcus. "I need to take this. It might help us find your mom." Asterisk. Blake stepped onto his balcony to take the call. "What did you find?" "Sir, I've been going through the Westbrook Commons files as you asked. There were 347 residential units cleared for that development. Most relocations went smoothly, but there's a subset of about 40 families where the compensation was problematic." "What does problematic mean exactly?" Blake demanded. "The relocation payments were processed through Meridian Services, a third-party contractor. According to our records, all payments were authorized and distributed, but Meridian filed for bankruptcy shortly afterward, and there are indications that some payments were never actually delivered to residents." Asterisk. Blake pinched the bridge of his nose. "And nobody followed up on this?" "There were attempts by some residents to contact Harrington Developments directly. All inquiries were routed to legal and—" Marcus hesitated. "And what?" "There's a memo in the file, sir, signed by you directing all Westbrook compensation disputes to be archived with no further action required due to liability concerns." Asterisk. Blake felt sick. He had a vague recollection of signing something to that effect. One document among hundreds that crossed his desk weekly. "Names, Marcus. I need names of the affected families." "I'm sending the list now. There's a Sarah Watson with a dependent minor listed, relocated from Unit 217 at Westbrook Commons." Asterisk. Blake turned to look through the glass doors at Lily, who was carefully rinsing her cereal bowl in the kitchen sink. "That's her. Find everything you can on Sarah Watson, current address, employer, anything. And Marcus, keep this between us for now." Asterisk. After hanging up, Blake returned inside. Lily, was your mum's name Sarah? Asterisk. Lily nodded, looking surprised. And did you used to live in a place called Westbrook Commons, with a little garden out front? Asterisk. Her eyes widened. How did you know about our geraniums? Just a guess, Blake said, his heart sinking further. Tell me about your old home. It was pretty. We had the flowers, and Mom let me paint my room yellow. Miss Rodriguez next door made the best cookies and would watch me after school until Mom came home from her day job. Then the letters came and Mom cried and we had to leave. Lily's small shoulders slumped. The new place is dark and smells funny. Mom has to work 2 jobs now, and I stay with Mrs. Guzman down the hall, but she falls asleep a lot. Do you remember the address of your new place? Asterisk. Lily recited an address in an area Blake recognized as one of Chicago's struggling neighborhoods. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus confirming the same address. Sarah Watson was currently employed by Metropolitan Cleaning Services, a I.O. company that handled janitorial work for several downtown office buildings, including Pinnacle Tower. Lily, I think your mum works in my building. That's probably why you ended up in that parking garage. Can we go find her, please? We will, I promise, but first, Blake hesitated. Would you like some new clothes and maybe shoes? We could go shopping. Asterisk. Lily looked down at her dirty clothes and nodded. Asterisk. An hour later, after a quick trip to a nearby department store, Lily was dressed in clean jeans, a purple sweater, and new sneakers. Blake had also bought her a small backpack and filled it with essentials just in case. The saleswoman had given him an approving smile, assuming he was a father treating his daughter. Asterisk. Back at the penthouse, Blake settled Lily with a coloring book, another purchase from their shopping trip, and retreated to his home office. Marcus had sent over more files, and Blake began the sobering task of piecing together what had happened to the Watsons. Asterisk. The official record showed a relocation payment of $25,000 authorized for Sarah Watson, a sum that should have helped secure decent housing elsewhere, but the payment had never reached her. Meridian Services had provided falsified delivery confirmations for dozens of payments while pocketing the money, and Harrington Developments had never verified actual receipt. When complaints began coming in, they were systematically buried, to avoid liability and negative press that might impact the Westbrook luxury development marketing. Asterisk. Worse still, Blake discovered that the bad place where Sarah and Lily now lived was owned by Urban Housing Partners, a subsidiary of a real estate investment trust that Blake himself was a silent partner in. The building was scheduled for demolition next year to make way for another upscale development. Asterisk. The phone records showed 17 attempts by Sarah Watson to reach someone at Harrington Developments over 2 years. 17 calls, each one documented, each one effectively ignored. Asterisk. Blake, quote, hands shook as he closed the laptop. How many other lives had been casually destroyed by his company's practices? How many other children like Lily had been uprooted, their stability shattered? And he had been too busy chasing the next big deal, the next billion-dollar project, to notice or care. Asterisk. A soft knock at his office door pulled him from his thoughts. Blake? Lily stood in the doorway, holding up a framed photograph she'd found on his bookshelf. I've seen this park before. Asterisk. Blake took the frame. It showed him at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Lakefront Park, a public-private partnership his company had sponsored last year as a goodwill gesture when they began buying up properties in the area. Mom took me there for my birthday, Lily continued. We had ice cream and she let me ride the carousel twice, even though it cost extra tickets. Asterisk. Blake stared at the photo, noticing for the first time the background details beyond the ceremonial ribbon. There, on a bench at the edge of the frame, sat a woman and a small girl sharing what appeared to be an ice cream cone. The woman's face was partially turned away, but the child was unmistakably Lily. When was your birthday, Lily? Asterisk. April 15th. I turned 8. Asterisk. Blake remembered that day clearly. April 15th was when he'd finalized the initial property acquisitions for the Riverside District project, the same one he'd been celebrating last night. While Lily and her mother had been celebrating with a modest ice cream cone, Blake had been in his office signing papers that would make him millions richer. Is that you? Lily pointed to Blake in the photo. Yes, he admitted. I helped build that park. Lily's face brightened. Then you're not the bad building man. You make nice things too. Asterisk. The innocent statement felt like a knife to Blake's chest. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Marcus again. Sir, there's something else you should know. Sarah Watson was admitted to Chicago Memorial Hospital 3 days ago. She was hit by a car while crossing Michigan Avenue. Blake's blood ran cold. How serious? Critical condition. She's been unconscious since admission. Asterisk. That explained why Lily had been alone in the garage. Her mother never came back from work because she'd been hospitalized. Any other family listed? None. According to hospital records, they've been trying to locate next of kin for the minor child mentioned in her employee records. I'm going to the hospital now, Blake said, ending the call. Asterisk. He turned to find Lily watching him, her eyes wide and frightened. Did they find my mom? Asterisk. Blake crouched down to her level, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Yes, Lily. Your mom is in the hospital. She had an accident a few days ago, which is why she couldn't come back to get you. Lily's lower lip trembled. Is she going to be okay? I don't know yet, Blake said honestly, but we're going to go see her right now, and I promise you that I will make sure she gets the very best care possible. Asterisk. As they rode the elevator down to the parking garage, Lily slipped her small hand into Blake's. The simple gesture of trust made his throat tight with emotion. This child had no idea that he was intimately connected to the circumstances that had upended her life, that he was, in fact, the bad building man she feared. Asterisk. And as they drove toward the hospital, Blake realized with growing clarity that making this right would require far more than cutting a check or making a few calls. It would mean confronting the entire system he had helped create, a system that prioritized profit over people, progress over compassion. Asterisk. It would mean becoming someone he barely recognized, someone his younger self might actually have admired. Asterisk. Chapter 3. The revelation. Asterisk. Chicago Memorial Hospital buzzed with the controlled chaos typical of a major urban medical center. Blake guided Lily through the maze of corridors, her small hand clutching his tightly. He'd made several calls, en route, ensuring that Sarah Watson would receive VIP treatment, the kind reserved for wealthy donors and their families. Money couldn't fix everything, but it could certainly grease the wheels of an overburdened healthcare system. Asterisk. Dr. Eleanor Chen, the hospital's chief of neurosurgery, met them outside the intensive care unit. She greeted Blake with professional courtesy. His company had funded the hospital's new West Wing last year, a fact not lost on the administration. Mr. Harrington, I understand you're here about Sarah Watson. Her eyes flickered to Lily, her expression softening. And you must be Lily. Your mom has told us a lot about you. Asterisk. Lily looked up, hope brightening her face. She's awake? She talked about me? Asterisk. Dr. Chen exchanged a glance with Blake. She mentioned you when she first arrived. Sweetie, right now your mom is sleeping deeply to help her body heal. Asterisk. Blake recognized the gentle evasion for what it was. Dr. Chen, could I speak with you privately for a moment? He turned to Lily. There's a nurse's station right there. Could you sit in that chair where I can see you just for a minute? Asterisk. Once Lily was settled, Blake stepped aside with the doctor. Give it to me straight, he said quietly. How bad is it? Asterisk. Dr. Chen's professional demeanor remained intact, but her eyes conveyed gravity. Miss Watson suffered severe head trauma from the impact. We performed surgery to relieve pressure from cerebral hemorrhaging, but she hasn't regained consciousness since. Her condition is critical but stable. Prognosis: uncertain. Brain injuries are notoriously unpredictable. Some patients wake up in days, others... She left the sentence unfinished. She will have the best care, Blake said firmly. Whatever specialists, treatments, equipment needed, I'll cover everything. Asterisk. Dr. Chen studied him curiously. May I ask your relationship to Miss Watson? Asterisk. Blake hesitated. I'm responsible for her daughter at present, and I feel a certain responsibility for her situation as well." "I see." Her tone suggested she didn't entirely, but wouldn't press further. "You should know that social services has been notified about Lily. Without any family coming forward, they'll need to make arrangements for her care." "That won't be necessary," Blake said quickly. "I'll be taking care of her until her mother recovers." Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "That's not typically how these situations are handled, Mr. Harrington. There are protocols, legal requirements." "I understand," Blake interrupted. "Have your administration contact my attorneys. They'll arrange whatever temporary guardianship paperwork is required. In the meantime, can we see Sarah?" The doctor nodded reluctantly, briefly. "And prepare the child. There are tubes and machines that might frighten her." Blake returned to Lily, crouching before her chair. "We're going to see your mum now, but I need to tell you something important first. Your mum was hurt pretty badly, and the doctors are helping her sleep so her body can heal. She has some special equipment around her to help her breathe and monitor her heart. It might look scary, but it's all helping her get better." Lily nodded solemnly, like when people are in comas on TV. Blake was surprised by her perception. "Yes, something like that. But people wake up from comas all the time." "Will she know I'm there?" "I believe she will," Blake said, though he had no medical basis for this assertion. Sometimes people in comas can hear what's happening around them, even if they can't respond. Sarah Watson's room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of the ventilator. She lay still, her face partially obscured by tubes and tape, a bandage wrapped around her head. Blake felt Lily freeze beside him, her hand suddenly gripping his with painful intensity. "Mom?" Her voice was barely audible. Blake gently guided her to the bedside. "It's okay to touch her hand. Just be gentle with the IV line." Lily reached out hesitantly, placing her small fingers over her mother's motionless ones. "Mom, it's me. Lily. I'm okay. I stayed where you said if we got separated." Her voice wavered. "Please wake up. I'll be really good. I won't ask for anything expensive." The monitor continued its steady beeping, Sarah's face remaining expressionless. Blake felt a lump form in his throat. "Can she have my picture?" Lily asked suddenly, pulling a folded paper from her new backpack, the drawing she'd been working on at the penthouse. It showed 3 figures, a woman, a child, and what appeared to be a man, standing beside a house with flowers. "That's a beautiful drawing," Blake said. "Oh, we can put it right here where she can see it when she wakes up." He took the picture and placed it on the bedside table, propped against a water pitcher. A nurse entered, carrying a plastic bag. "These are the patient's personal effects from admission. Hospital policy requires a family member to claim them." Blake took the bag. "Thank you, we'll take care of these." After promising Lily they would return tomorrow, Blake led her back to his car. She was unnaturally quiet. Her earlier animation completely vanished. In the passenger seat, she stared out the window, occasionally wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her new sweater. "She's going to wake up," Blake said, trying to sound confident. "Your mum is getting excellent care." Lily didn't respond. Back at the penthouse, Blake ordered dinner, while Lily sat curled on the sofa, hugging a decorative pillow to her chest. His efforts to engage her met with one-word answers or silence. He couldn't blame her. The shock of seeing her mother in such a state would be traumatic for anyone, let alone an 8-year-old child. After picking at her food, Lily asked to go to bed early. Blake tucked her in, promised to leave his door open in case she needed anything, and retreated to his living room, Sarah Watson's personal effects bag in hand. Inside comma. He found her wallet, a set of keys, a worn cell phone with a cracked screen, and a manila folder thick with papers. Opening the folder, Blake discovered what Sarah had been carrying when she was hit. Documentation of her family's displacement from Westbrook Commons, medical records for Lily showing asthma treatments likely triggered by poor living conditions. In their current apartment, and meticulously calculated spreadsheets showing exactly what she believed Harrington Developments owed her family. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten letter in a child's uneven scrawl. "Dear Mom, please, don't cry anymore. When I grow up, I will buy us a pretty house again. I love you, Lily." Blake set the papers aside, a wave of shame washing over him. He opened Sarah's phone, relieved to find it still had some battery life. The call history showed multiple attempts to reach Harrington Development's corporate office over the past week. The most recent call had been placed just hours before her accident. More disturbing was what he found in her text messages, an exchange with her current landlord, informing her that her rent was increasing by 30% next month, and if she couldn't pay, plenty of others will. The landlord's company name was listed in the contact, Urban Horizons Property Management, the subsidiary Blake had a stake in. Blake poured himself a scotch and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring out at the glittering Chicago skyline. How many of those lights represented families like the Watsons, struggling to keep a roof over their heads while people like him profited from their desperation? His phone rang. Marcus again. "What did you find?" Blake asked without preamble. "Sir, I've been going through security footage from Pinnacle Tower, as you requested. 3 nights ago, Sarah Watson attempted to access the executive floors after her cleaning shift. She had that documentation you mentioned with her. And she was stopped by security. Richard Coleman, our head of security, personally escorted her from the building." Blake closed his eyes. "Send me the footage." Minutes later, Blake watched the security video on his laptop. Sarah Watson, a slender woman with dark hair tied back, exhaustion evident even in the grainy footage, stood at the security desk, clutching the same manila folder Blake had just examined. Her expression was determined yet desperate as she argued with the guard. The footage showed Richard Coleman arriving, his imposing figure instantly recognizable. Words were exchanged. There was no audio, and Sarah became increasingly agitated, gesturing with the folder. Coleman took her by the arm, firmly guiding her toward the exit. What happened next made Blake's blood run cold. As Coleman was escorting Sarah out, Blake himself emerged from an elevator, distracted by his phone. For a brief moment, Sarah and Blake were mere feet apart. She looked directly at him, recognition and desperation clear in her expression. She called out. Blake could read his own name on her lips, but he never looked up from his device. After a moment, he turned and walked back toward the executive suites, completely oblivious to her presence. The footage continued, showing Sarah standing in the rain outside the building, shoulders slumped in defeat. Timestamp 11:23 p.m. According to the police report Marcus had obtained, Sarah was struck by a vehicle at approximately 11:47 p.m., just blocks from Pinnacle Tower. Blake closed the laptop, feeling physically ill. He had been right there. He could have heard her story, addressed the injustice, prevented the chain of events that led to her current state. Instead, he'd been too absorbed in his own world to even notice her existence. His phone buzzed again, a text from Marcus. "Sir, there's more. The vehicle that struck Miss Watson has been identified from traffic cameras. Black Audi A8, license plate partially visible, registered to Douglas Parker, CFO at First Capital Partners. First Capital was Harrington Development's primary financial backer. Douglas Parker and Blake had played golf together just last weekend, discussing the Riverside District financing while sipping expensive bourbon at the clubhouse afterward. Blake, quote, S. hands trembled as he typed his response. Police investigation? Marcus replied immediately. Report shows driver fled the scene, investigation ongoing but marked low priority. Of course it was. A cleaning lady hit in a poor neighborhood wouldn't command the same police resources as a similar incident in the Gold. Blake poured another scotch, his mind racing. The connections were becoming clearer and more disturbing with each revelation. Sarah Watson hadn't just been a random victim of circumstance. She'd been systematically wronged by a network of powerful interests, all connected to Blake himself. Her displacement, her financial struggles, even her accident, all stemmed from a system Blake had helped build and profited immensely from. A soft sound from the hallway made him turn. Lily stood in the doorway, her small figure silhouetted against the dim light. "I can't sleep," she said quietly. "I keep thinking about Mom." Blake set down his glass and crossed to her. "That's understandable. Would you like some warm milk?" "That sometimes helps." She shook her head. "Can I see her picture, the one from your shelf?" Blake retrieved the framed photograph of the park opening. Lily took it carefully, tracing her finger over the tiny figures of herself and her mother, in the background. "We were happy that day," she said simply. "Before the bad things started." Blake felt a question forming that he both needed and dreaded to ask. "Lily, the bad building man you mentioned, did you ever see him?" She nodded, still looking at the photo. "Once, he came to our neighborhood with other men in suits. They were pointing at buildings and taking pictures. Mom pointed him out. She said he was the one who took our home and didn't pay us like he promised." "Did she say his name?" Lily's forehead wrinkled in concentration. "Something like Harry, but longer." "Harrington?" Blake said quietly. "That's it?" Lily looked up at him. "Do you know him?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than Blake had anticipated. He could lie, maintain the facade of the benevolent stranger, but something told him that would only compound his sins. "Lily," he said, sitting down so they were at eye level, "I need to tell you something, and it's going to be confusing and maybe upsetting, but I think it's important to be honest." She regarded him with those serious eyes that seemed to see more than an 8-year-old should. "My full name is Blake Harrington. I own the company that bought the building where you and your mom used to live." Lily's eyes widened. She took a step back, clutching the photo frame. "You're the bad building man?" Blake nodded, his throat tight. "I am, or I was, and I'm so sorry for what happened to you and your mom." Lily stared at him, confusion and betrayal washing over her face. She backed away further, bumping into the wall behind her. "You lied to me." "I did at first," Blake admitted. "I didn't know who you were when I found you, but now I do, and I want to make things right." "You can't," she said, her voice suddenly hard for such a young child. "You can't fix Mom. You can't give us back our home or make her stop working all night. You're the reason she got hurt." The accusation hit Blake like a physical blow, not because it was unfair, but because it was true. "You're right," he said quietly. "I am responsible for a lot of the bad things that happened to you and your mum. Not everything, but enough, and I can't undo what's been done. But I promise you, Lily, I will do everything in my power to help your mum get better and to make sure you both have a good home and everything you need from now on." Tears welled in her eyes. "I want my mom. I want to go home." "I know." Blake fought the urge to reach for her, sensing she needed space. "And I promise we'll go see your mom again tomorrow. As for home, we'll figure that out together, okay? But you're safe here for now, and I won't let anything bad happen to you." Lily said nothing more, just turned and walked back to the guest room, still clutching the photograph. Blake heard the door close softly. He remained sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, for a long time afterward. The child's simple accusation had laid bare the truth he'd been avoiding for years. Behind every successful development, every profitable acquisition, were real human lives affected by his decisions. Lives he had conveniently ignored in his pursuit of wealth and power. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, Blake made a decision. The path forward wouldn't be easy or comfortable. It would likely cost him much of what he'd spent his life building. But for the first time in decades, he felt the stirring of something like purpose, something beyond the next deal, the next profit margin. He would make this right, not just for Lily and Sarah, but for all the others who had been trampled in. his company's relentless march toward progress, and he would start today. Chapter 4. The Investigation Asterisk. The Harrington Development's headquarters occupied the top 5 floors of Pinnacle Tower, its glass and steel facade gleaming in the morning. Sunlight. Blake entered through a private elevator, nodding tersely to staff members who greeted him with their usual deference. Today, however, he viewed the sleek modern offices through new eyes, seeing not achievement but the machinery of displacement that had affected so many lives like Lily S. Lily had barely spoken during breakfast or the ride to the private school where Blake had arranged for her to spend the day. A child psychologist friend of his had recommended normalcy and structure, and the exclusive academy had agreed to accept Lily as a visitor in their 3rd grade class. Blake had promised to pick her up before visiting Sarah at the hospital. Mr. Harrington, his executive assistant, greeted him, tablet in hand. The board is waiting in the conference room. They've called an emergency meeting regarding the Channel 7 investigation. Let them wait, Blake replied. I need you to pull additional files for me first. Get me everything on Douglas Parker's relationship with our security division, and find out who authorized Richard Coleman to intervene directly with visitors to the building. Marcus looked confused. Sir, Mr. Coleman reports directly to you. The protocol for handling unwanted visitors was established in your security directive last year. Blake felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. He'd approved a policy to keep protesters and critics away from executive offices, a policy that had prevented Sarah Watson from reaching him with her legitimate grievance. Change of plans, Blake said. Tell the board I'll be there in 30 minutes, and get Coleman up to my office, now. In his corner office, Blake reviewed the files Marcus had quickly assembled. The picture emerging was disturbing in its clarity. Douglas Parker, CFO of First Capital Partners, had been handling sensitive community issues related to Harrington Developments for years. His name appeared on multiple internal memos regarding relocation disputes, always recommending the same approach. Deny, delay, and if necessary, discredit. Richard Coleman entered without knocking, his imposing frame filling the doorway. You wanted to see me, sir? Blake gestured to a chair. 3 nights ago, you escorted a woman named Sarah Watson from this building. Tell me about that interaction. Coleman's expression remained neutral. Just following protocol, sir. Unauthorized. Individuals attempting to access executive floors are to be removed immediately. She was becoming disruptive. Disruptive how? Insisting on seeing you personally, making accusations about the company, the usual complaints from these types. These types, Blake echoed, his voice dangerous. Coleman shifted uncomfortably. People looking for handouts, sir. Blake slid the security footage across the desk. Watch this. Then explain to me why you didn't inform me that a woman was specifically asking to see me regarding a legitimate business matter. Coleman watched the silent footage, his face hardening. As I said, we get dozens of people trying to access the executive floors with complaints. If I bothered you with each one. That wasn't your decision to make, Blake interrupted. What happened after you escorted her out? Did you call her a cab? It was pouring rain. Coleman's silence was damning. Did you contact Douglas Parker? After this incident, A flicker of surprise crossed Coleman's face. I don't know what you're talking about, sir. Don't lie to me, Blake said coldly. Phone records show you called Parker's private line at 11:27 p.m., 4 minutes after Sarah Watson left this building. 20 minutes later, she was hit by a car registered to Parker, who fled the scene. Now I'll ask you once more. What did you tell Parker? Coleman's composure cracked. Nothing specific, sir. Just that there might be a PR problem heading his way. A cleaning woman with documentation about Westbrook. He said he'd handle it. Blake felt physically ill. Get out of my office. You're suspended. Effective. Immediately. Security will escort you from the building. On what grounds? Coleman demanded. Potential criminal conspiracy for starters, Blake replied. I suggest you lawyer up. Now get out before I have you thrown out. After Coleman left, Blake sat heavily in his chair, the weight of what he'd discovered pressing down on him. He hadn't directly ordered the hit and run, but he had created the system and culture that made it possible. His company's pursuit of profit at all costs had fostered an environment where problems were eliminated by any means necessary. His phone buzzed. The board was getting impatient. Blake straightened his tie and headed to the conference room, his mind made up. The Harrington Development's board of directors consisted of 12 members, wealthy investors, real estate veterans, and financial experts. They fell silent as Blake entered, their expressions a mixture of concern and irritation. "Blake, what's this about an investigation?" Victoria Sheldon, the board chair, demanded. "PR says Channel 7 is running a piece on uncompensated relocations from the Westbrook project. They're claiming fraud and potentially criminal negligence." Blake took his seat at the head of the table. "The allegations are true." A stunned silence fell over the room. "What the hell are you talking about?" James Morrison, their chief legal counsel, finally sputtered. "Meridian Services, the contractor we hired to handle relocation payments, diverted funds meant for dozens of displaced families," Blake explained calmly. "They provided us with falsified confirmation of payments. When residents tried to contact us directly about missing compensation, their complaints were systematically buried. I personally signed off on a memo directing legal to ignore these claims." The board members exchanged alarmed glances. "This is potentially catastrophic," Morrison said. "If these allegations can be proven—" "They can," Blake interrupted. "I've already verified them myself." "Why are you telling us this?" Victoria asked, suspiciously. "And why now?" Blake met her gaze directly. "Because I'm going to fix it. I've instructed accounting to prepare compensation packages for every affected family from Westbrook Commons. The original payments plus interest and damages for hardship caused." "That could run into millions," protested Harold Fisher, their CFO. "27 million to be precise," Blake confirmed. "I've already authorized the transfers from my personal accounts to cover it." The room erupted in objections and questions. Blake let the chaos continue for a moment before raising his hand for silence. "There's more. I believe an executive at First Capital Partners may have been involved in a hit-and-run that seriously injured one of the Westbrook residents attempting to contact us. I've turned over evidence to the district attorney's office this morning." Victoria. Sheldon's face had gone pale. "First Capital is our primary financial partner. If you're accusing Douglas Parker—" "I've named no names publicly," Blake said, "but I won't obstruct justice either. If Parker is guilty, he'll face the consequences." "This is madness," Morrison declared. "You're threatening the very existence of this company based on some misplaced guilt. We need to contain this, not amplify it." "That's exactly the thinking that created this situation," Blake replied. "Contain, deny, bury. Not anymore. From now on, Harrington Developments will operate with complete transparency and accountability. We will make restitution to those we've wronged, and we will change our business practices to ensure this never happens again." "The shareholders will revolt," Fisher warned. "Stock prices will plummet." "Probably," Blake agreed. "Which is why I've called for an emergency shareholders meeting tomorrow morning. They deserve to know the truth." Victoria leaned forward. "Blake, I've known you for 15 years. You've built this company from nothing into a billion-dollar enterprise. I understand you might be going through something personal right now, but this is not the way to handle it. Let legal manage this situation." Blake shook his head. "Not this time, Victoria. I've already scheduled a press conference for this afternoon. I'm going to publicly acknowledge our failures and announce our commitment to making amends." "We can't allow that," Morrison stated flatly. "As legal counsel, I strongly advise against any public statement, and as a board member, I move that we temporarily relieve Blake of his duties as CEO, effective immediately, pending a mental health evaluation." Several board members nodded in agreement. Blake smiled thinly. "You can't," My voting shares give me controlling interest. You serve at my pleasure, not the other way around. Then we'll resign en masse, Victoria threatened. How will the markets react to that? That's your choice, Blake replied calmly. But before you do, you should know that I've instructed my legal team to prepare individual liability assessments for each board member regarding the Westbrook situation. Some of you signed off on those decisions alongside me. Others were aware but chose to look the other way. Either way, if this company goes down for fraud, none of you will emerge unscathed. Asterisk. The threat hung in the air like a thundercloud. What do you want from us? Fisher finally asked. Your support in making this right, Blake said simply. Help me fix what we broke. Help me transform this company into something we can actually be proud of. Asterisk. The board meeting continued for 3 more hours, with heated arguments giving way to reluctant strategic planning. By the end, a fragile consensus had emerged. They would support Blake's remediation plan, control the narrative through a carefully managed disclosure process, and implement new ethical guidelines for all future developments. Asterisk. It wasn't the full accountability Blake had initially envisioned, but it was a start. More importantly, it would get immediate help to the families who had suffered from their negligence. Asterisk. As the meeting adjourned, Victoria pulled Blake aside. What's really going on with you? This isn't just about corporate responsibility. Asterisk. Blake hesitated, then decided on honesty. I met someone affected by our actions, a child who lost her home because of decisions I made without considering the human cost. Her mother is in a coma after being hit by a car while trying to get justice. I can't ignore that anymore. Asterisk. Victoria studied him for a long moment. I hope you know what you're doing, Blake. There's no going back from this. I know, he replied. That's the point. Asterisk. After leaving the office, Blake drove to the exclusive private school where he'd left Lily that morning. The administrator met him in the lobby, her expression grave. Mr. Harrington, there's been an incident. Lily became very upset during lunch period and ran from the classroom. We found her hiding in the library, but she's refusing to come out or speak to anyone. Asterisk. Blake felt his heart sink. Let me talk to her. Asterisk. He found Lily curled in a window seat in the corner of the library, clutching her backpack to her chest. Hey, he said gently, sitting down across from her. Tough day? Asterisk. She glared at him, eyes red from crying. I hate it here. Everyone has fancy clothes and talks about their vacation houses. A boy laughed when I said my mum cleans offices. Asterisk. Blake winced. I'm sorry. I thought I was trying to help. You can't help by making me pretend to be someone else, Lily said with surprising insight for her age. I don't belong here. You're right, Blake admitted. I should have asked what you wanted instead of assuming. Where would you feel more comfortable? Asterisk. Lily thought for a moment. I want to see my mom, and then maybe Mrs. Guzman from our apartment building. She's nice. We'll definitely see your mom, Blake promised, and we can visit Mrs. Guzman too. Would you like to go back to your apartment and get some of your things? Asterisk. Lily nodded, relaxing slightly. Okay then, let's get out of here. Asterisk. As they drove toward the hospital, Blake filled Lily in on some of what had happened that day, carefully edited for her age. He explained that he was working to fix his company's mistakes and help families like hers, who hadn't been treated fairly. Does that mean we can go back to our old house with the garden? Lily asked hopefully. The old building isn't there anymore, Blake said gently, but I promise you'll have a good home with a garden if that's what you want. Asterisk. At the hospital, they found Sarah's condition unchanged. Lily climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed, talking softly to her mother about her day, while Blake stepped out to speak with Dr. Chen about the latest test results. There's minimal brain activity, but it's there, the doctor explained. We're seeing small responses to stimuli. It's a positive sign, but I don't want to create false hopes. What's the best-case scenario? Blake asked. Best case? She wakes up within weeks, with some memory and motor function issues that can be addressed with therapy. Worst case? Dr. Chen left the thought unfinished. Cost is no object, Blake reiterated. Whatever specialists, treatments, equipment she needs. Asterisk, Dr. Chen nodded. I've already consulted with Dr. Patel at Johns Hopkins. He's pioneered some promising approaches. For cases like this, he's reviewing her files now. Asterisk. When Blake returned to the room, he found Lily reading aloud from a children's book she'd brought in her backpack, one small hand resting on her mother's arm. The simple scene of devotion touched something deep within him, a reminder of what truly mattered in a life he'd spent chasing wealth and status. Asterisk. As they prepared to leave, a nurse entered with an update. The police are here asking questions about Miss Watson's accident. They want to know if she's regained consciousness or if anyone has information about the vehicle involved. Asterisk. Blake straightened. I'd like to speak with them. Asterisk. Outside. In the hallway, Blake introduced himself to the two detectives. I believe I have information relevant to your investigation, he said, handing them a thumb drive. This contains security footage and phone records, suggesting the hit and run may not have been accidental. I've already provided copies to the District Attorney's Office. Asterisk. The detectives exchanged surprised glances. This is highly unusual, Mr. Harrington. Mind telling us your interest in this case? I'm temporarily responsible for Miss Watson's daughter, Blake explained. And I have reason to believe business associates of mine may be involved. I want justice served, regardless of the consequences. Asterisk. After the detectives left, Blake took Lily to her apartment building in one of Chicago's struggling neighborhoods. The contrast with his luxury penthouse was stark. Peeling paint, unreliable elevators, and a persistent smell of mildew. This was the reality for thousands of Chicago residents, the invisible people who made the city function, while developers like him prospered. Asterisk. Mrs. Guzman, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a slight limp, greeted Lily with a crushing hug. My Nina, I've been so worried. The police came asking questions, but I didn't know what to tell them. Asterisk. Blake introduced himself simply as a friend, helping Lily while her mother was hospitalized. Mrs. Guzman invited them in for coffee, and Blake listened as she spoke about Sarah, her dedication to Lily, her exhausting work schedule, her quiet dignity in the face of hardship. She was always helping others, even with so little herself, Mrs. Guzman said, stroking Lily's hair. When my arthritis was bad last winter, she brought me groceries every week, never would take a penny. Asterisk. While Lily packed some clothes and treasured possessions from the small apartment she shared with her mother, Blake discreetly pressed some cash into Mrs. Guzman's hand. For any expenses you had while looking after Lily. And please call me if you need anything at all. Asterisk. As they drove back to Blake's penthouse, Lily clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest. My dad gave me this before he went away, she explained. Mom said he had to move far away for work, but he loved me very much. I'm sure he did, Blake replied, wondering about the man's absence. Another casualty of poverty, perhaps. Relationships. Strained to breaking by financial pressure and limited opportunities. Asterisk. The local news was playing on the kitchen TV when they returned to the penthouse. Blake froze when he saw his own face on the screen, beneath the headline, Real Estate Mogul Admits Wrongdoing in Displacement Scandal. Asterisk. The press conference. In the chaos of the day, he'd forgotten his own scheduled announcement. His PR team must have proceeded without him. Harrington Developments acknowledges these failures and is committed to making full restitution to affected families, his recorded self stated on screen. We are cooperating fully with authorities regarding all aspects of this situation. Asterisk. Lily stared at the television, then at Blake. Is that about us? About Mum? Asterisk. Blake nodded. Part of it, yes. Remember I told you I was going to try to fix things? This is the start of that. Asterisk. His phone began ringing incessantly. Board members, investors, reporters, all demanding explanations or damage control. Blake silenced it and turned his attention to Lily. How about we make dinner together? I'm not much of a cook, but I bet between us we can figure something out. Asterisk. As they worked side by side making a simple pasta dish, Blake realized this was the most normal human interaction he'd had in years. No power dynamics, no business agenda, just caring for a child who needed him. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Blake sat in his darkened living room contemplating the path ahead. His company's stock had already dropped 17% on news of the scandal. His reputation in business circles would be in tatters. Many of his so-called friends would distance themselves once the full story emerged. Yet, despite these losses, Blake felt something unfamiliar, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with wealth or status. For the first time in decades, he was acting in alignment with the values he'd abandoned in his climb to the top. His phone rang again, an unknown number. Blake almost ignored it, but something compelled him to answer. "Mr. Harrington, this is Nurse Jacobs from Chicago Memorial. I thought you should know." Sarah Watson showed signs of response during evening rounds. Her fingers moved when her daughter's name was mentioned. A small change, but significant. As Blake hung up, he found himself doing something he hadn't done since childhood. He prayed, not to any specific deity, but to whatever force might govern second chances, that Sarah Watson would wake up and find her world transformed for the better. And that maybe, just maybe, there could be redemption even for someone like him. Chapter 5. The Consequences. The following week brought a whirlwind of change to Blake's life. Harrington Development stock continued its free fall, losing nearly 40% of its value as investors fled the controversy. Business associates who had eagerly courted his attention now avoided his calls. The business press, which had once hailed him as Chicago's visionary developer, now ran headlines questioning his judgment and stability. Blake weathered the professional storm while establishing a new routine centered around Lily. Mornings began with breakfast together before a social worker named Miss Abernathy, appointed by the court to monitor Lily's temporary placement with Blake, arrived to take her to a more suitable school. Afternoons were spent at the hospital with Sarah, followed by dinner and homework at the penthouse. On this particular morning, Blake sat across from his attorney, Michael Prentice, in the penthouse's home office, reviewing the mounting legal challenges. "The shareholders are organizing a class action suit," Prentice explained. "They're claiming your public disclosure constituted a breach of fiduciary duty. Meanwhile, the SEC has opened an inquiry into potential securities fraud related to the Westbrook Commons situation." Blake nodded, unsurprised. "What about the families? Have the compensation payments begun?" "Yes, but there's resistance from the board. They've filed for an injunction to block further payments pending a full audit." "They can't stop what's already been distributed," Blake noted with satisfaction. "And the Watson compensation?" "Held in trust as you directed, awaiting Sarah's recovery or..." Prentice hesitated. "Alternative arrangements for Lily's guardianship." Blake frowned. The unspoken reality hung between them. If Sarah didn't recover, Lily would likely enter the foster care system. The thought was increasingly unbearable. "I want to explore legal options for more permanent guardianship," Blake said, "just as a contingency." Prentice looked skeptical. "Given your current legal situation and lack of familial connection, that would be extremely challenging." "Find a way," Blake insisted. "Now, what about Douglas Parker?" "Arrested yesterday on charges of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in serious injury. His lawyer is already floating a plea deal. Apparently, Parker is willing to implicate others in exchange for leniency." "Others meaning me," Blake surmised. "Potentially, he's claiming there was an established protocol for handling problems that came from the top, meaning you." Blake rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his past decisions. "What would you advise?" Prentice leaned forward. "Honestly, settle everything you can. The SEC, the shareholders, the relocated families offer generous terms and move on. As for Parker, that's trickier. If he's suggesting you ordered or knew about the hit and run..." "I didn't," Blake interrupted firmly. "I believe you, but perception matters in cases like this. Your public stance against your own company makes you look guilty of something. The DA might see prosecuting you as a career-making move." Their conversation was interrupted by Lily's appearance in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Miss Abernathy is here," she announced, studying Blake's visitor curiously. "I'll be right there," Blake replied, standing to end the meeting. "We'll continue this later." Asterisk. As Prentice gathered his papers, Lily approached Blake. "Are you in trouble?" she asked directly, her perceptiveness once again catching him off guard. "Some people are upset about the changes I'm making," Blake explained carefully, "but don't worry about that." "Is it because of us? Me and Mom?" "No," Blake said firmly, crouching to her eye level. "It's because of choices I made a long time ago. I'm just trying to fix them now." Asterisk. Lily seemed to accept this. "We're going to see Mom after school, right?" "Absolutely. I'll pick you up at 3. Asterisk. After Lily left with the social worker, Blake prepared for his next challenge, a board meeting, where he expected a formal vote of no confidence. He selected his attire carefully, not his usual power suit, but something more subdued, appropriate for a man taking responsibility rather than wielding authority. Asterisk. Arriving at Pinnacle Tower, Blake noted the changed atmosphere immediately. Security staff who once greeted him with deference now watched warily. Employees in the elevator averted their eyes or exited when he entered. The isolation of the powerful had transformed into the isolation of the fallen. Asterisk. The boardroom, typically a space where Blake commanded absolute respect, now felt hostile territory. Several seats remained conspicuously empty, board members who hadn't even bothered to attend, having already decided their position. Asterisk. Victoria Sheldon opened the meeting without preamble. "This special session is called to address the leadership crisis at Harrington Developments. The agenda includes a vote of no confidence in CEO Blake Harrington and the appointment of an interim leadership team." "Before we proceed," Blake interjected, "I'd like to present an alternative proposal." Victoria's expression remained stony, but she nodded permission. "I'm prepared to step down as CEO," Blake stated calmly, surprising the room. "But I propose a managed transition rather than a forced removal, which would only further damage the company's reputation and stock value." Asterisk. Murmurs spread around the table as Blake continued. "I'll surrender operational control immediately to a transitional leadership team of your choosing. In exchange, I ask for 2 non-negotiable conditions. First, the remediation program for displaced families proceeds as planned. Second, the company commits to implementing the ethical development guidelines I've drafted." Asterisk. Harold Fisher scoffed. "You're hardly in a position to make demands, Blake." "I still control majority voting shares," Blake reminded them. "I could make this transition exceedingly difficult. Instead, I'm offering a clean break that preserves the company's future while making amends for past wrongs." Asterisk. The debate that followed was heated, with factions forming around various positions. Some board members viewed Blake's offer as the most pragmatic solution to an impossible situation. Others wanted nothing less than his complete removal and repudiation. Asterisk. After 2 hours of arguments, a compromise emerged. Blake would resign as CEO but retain a non-executive board position to oversee the implementation of the remediation program, which would proceed in a modified form. The ethical guidelines would be taken under advisement by the new leadership team. "It's the best you'll get," Victoria told him bluntly during a break. "Take it or prepare for an ugly, protracted fight." Asterisk. Blake accepted the terms, knowing it was indeed the best possible outcome. He would lose daily operational control, but retain enough influence to ensure the most important promises were kept. Asterisk. The press release announcing his strategic transition was crafted to minimize market impact, characterizing the move as Blake's personal decision to focus on community relations while the company strengthened its core business operations. Asterisk. By late afternoon, it was done. Blake cleared essential items from his office under the watchful eyes of corporate security, a humiliating but expected protocol. His executive assistant Marcus helped carry the few personal items he'd chosen to keep. "I didn't expect it to end this way," Marcus said quietly as they waited for the elevator. "It's not ending," Blake replied. "It's transforming. And Marcus, thank you for your loyalty through all this." "What will you do now, sir?" Blake considered the question. Focus on what matters. Sarah Watson's recovery, Lily's well-being, making amends where I can. Asterisk. As Blake walked through the lobby for what might be the last time as CEO, he noticed the security guard who had once prevented Sarah from reaching him. Their eyes met briefly. The guard quickly looked away, shame evident in his posture. Asterisk. Outside, a small group of protesters had gathered, holding signs condemning Harrington Development's displacement practices. Blake paused, recognizing the opportunity to do something his corporate self would never have considered. He approached the group directly. "I'm Blake Harrington," he said simply. "I understand your anger, your right to demand accountability." Asterisk the. Protesters fell silent, shocked by his direct engagement. "I can't undo what's been done," Blake continued, "but I'm committed to making restitution and ensuring these practices stop. If you're willing, I'd like to hear your stories and understand how my company's actions affected your lives." Asterisk, a middle-aged woman, stepped forward. "Why should we believe you now? Where was this concern when our neighborhoods were being demolished?" "You shouldn't believe me," Blake acknowledged. "Not yet. Judge me by my actions going forward, not my words today." Asterisk. He handed her his personal card, not his corporate one. "My direct line. Call me. I promise I'll answer." Asterisk. The exchange was brief but significant, the first time Blake had directly faced those harmed by his business practices without the protective shield of corporate protocol or security personnel. Asterisk. By the time Blake reached the hospital for his daily visit with Sarah, news of his resignation had broken publicly. Nurses and staff whispered as he passed, the scandal now firmly attached to his identity. Asterisk. Lily was already in Sarah's room with Miss Abernathy, showing her mother a project from school, a drawing of 3 stick figures beside what appeared to be a house. "That's Mom." "That's me and that's Blake," she explained to the unresponsive figure in the bed. "We're at our new house. See the flowers?" Blake's heart constricted at the casual inclusion of himself in Lily's concept of family. It was a trust he hadn't earned, and might not be able to maintain. Asterisk. Miss Abernathy pulled him aside as Lily continued talking to her mother. "Mr. Harrington, given today's developments, we need to discuss Lily's placement. The court granted temporary custody based partly on your stability and resources." "Nothing has changed regarding my ability to care for Lily," Blake said firmly. "My financial situation remains secure, regardless of my professional status." "It's not just financial considerations," Miss Abernathy replied. "There are questions of propriety and potential conflicts of interest, given your connection to what happened to Miss Watson." "What are you suggesting?" "The court may consider alternative placement while these matters are resolved. Perhaps a foster family with experience handling trauma cases." Asterisk. The thought of Lily being placed with strangers, especially now, was intolerable. That would only add to her trauma. She's finally establishing trust and routine. Moving her now would be devastating. Asterisk. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent call from the nurse's station. Dr. Chen entered moments later, her expression carefully professional. "We're seeing increased neural activity," she explained. "Miss Watson is showing more consistent responses to stimuli. It's a positive development." "Is she waking up?" Lily asked eagerly, having overheard. "Not yet, sweetheart," Dr. Chen replied gently. "But these are good signs. Your mum is fighting hard." Asterisk. After Lily returned to Sarah's bedside, Blake pressed for more details. "It's encouraging," Dr. Chen said quietly, "but recovery from severe brain trauma is a marathon, not a sprint. Even if she regains consciousness, there will likely be significant challenges ahead. Whatever she needs," Blake reiterated. "Rehabilitation, specialized care, home modifications, consider it guaranteed." Asterisk. Dr. Chen studied him curiously. "May I speak frankly, Mr. Harrington? I've seen many cases where wealthy individuals make grand promises in moments of crisis or guilt. Those promises often evaporate once the immediate situation changes or public attention shifts." "That won't happen here," Blake said firmly. "For Lily's sake, I hope you're right." She handed him a business card. This is a family counselor who specializes in medical trauma situations. I'd recommend sessions for both you and Lily. This journey is just beginning, and it will test you in ways you can't anticipate. Asterisk. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Blake found himself drawn to Sarah's folder of documents again. Among the papers was a small photo album Lily had brought from their apartment. The images told the story of a life lived with love despite limited means. Sarah and baby Lily in a modest apartment, a toddler Lily on a park swing with Sarah laughing behind her. Lily's first day of school, her smile revealing missing front. Teeth. Asterisk. The final pages showed their life at Westbrook Commons, the pretty house with its small garden of geraniums. Sarah looked younger, less careworn. These were the memories that had been erased by Blake's company, the stability shattered by decisions made in boardrooms far removed from their consequences. Asterisk. Blake, quote, S phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Harrington? This is Angela Reyes. You gave me your card earlier today at the protest. Yes, Miss Reyes, thank you for calling. I represent the Westbrook Commons Tenant Association. We've been fighting for justice for 2 years. Now suddenly you want to talk? I do, Blake confirmed. Not as CEO of Harrington Developments, but as someone trying to make amends. What happened to your community was wrong, and I bear responsibility. Asterisk. There was a long pause. We're meeting tomorrow evening at First Baptist on Harrison Street. 7 p.m. If you're serious, come alone. No lawyers, no assistants, just you. I'll be there, Blake promised. Asterisk. After hanging up, Blake poured himself a scotch and moved to the window. The Chicago skyline glittered before him, a landscape he had helped shape with his developments. He had once viewed it with pride, seeing only the gleaming towers and prosperous neighborhoods his company had created. Asterisk. Now he saw the shadows between those towers, the displaced communities, the lost homes, the lives disrupted in the name of progress and profit. And one shadow in particular, a small girl waiting in a parking garage abandoned by a system that should have protected her. Asterisk. Blake, quote, S phone buzzed with a text from Michael Prentice. Parker talking to prosecutors, claiming, you knew about handling problem. Tenants need to discuss strategy ASAP. Asterisk. The legal walls were closing in. Blake's public stance had made him vulnerable to accusations from those looking to save themselves. Douglas Parker's claim that Blake knew about tactics to intimidate problem tenants wasn't entirely false. Blake had approved aggressive relocation strategies and ignored complaints. But he had never authorized violence or harassment. Asterisk. Would that distinction matter in the court of public opinion? Or to prosecutors eager to make an example of a fallen business titan? More importantly, would it matter to Lily if he was dragged through a public prosecution? How would she feel to discover that her temporary guardian was painted as the architect of her mother's suffering? As these questions swirled in his mind, Blake heard a small sound behind him. Lily stood in the hallway in her pajamas, clutching her teddy bear. I had a bad dream, she said simply. About Mom. Asterisk. Blake set down his glass and moved to her side. Want to talk about it? Asterisk. She shook her head. Can I just sit with you for a while? Of course. Asterisk. They settled on the sofa, Lily leaning against Blake's side, the teddy bear squeezed tightly in her arms. Neither spoke for several minutes. Blake, she finally whispered, what happens if Mom doesn't wake up? Asterisk. The question he'd been dreading asked with a child's directness. Your mom is getting stronger every day, Blake said carefully. The doctors are seeing good signs. But what if she doesn't? Lily persisted. Will I have to go live with strangers? Asterisk. Blake took a deep breath. I don't know exactly what would happen, Lily, but I promise you this. I will do everything in my power to make sure you're safe and cared for, no matter what. Could I stay with you? The question was barely audible. Asterisk. Blake felt something shift. Inside him, a crystallization of purpose that transcended legal complications, professional fallout, and uncertain futures. If that's what you wanted, and if it were legally possible, yes, he said honestly, I would want that very much. Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. She closed her eyes, her small body gradually relaxing against him as sleep reclaimed her. Blake remained motionless, unwilling to disturb her rest. In the quiet darkness, he made a silent vow to Sarah, to Lily, to himself. Whatever the cost, to his reputation, his career, or his freedom, he would see this through. He would ensure justice for Sarah, security for Lily, and restitution for all those harmed by his company's actions. The path ahead would be difficult, perhaps even dangerous, given the powerful interests now aligned against him. But for the first time in decades, Blake Harrington's course was determined not by profit or prestige, but by something far more fundamental: the simple promise made to a child who had lost everything yet still found the courage to trust. Chapter 6: The Awakening *. The basement of First Baptist Church on Harrison Street hummed with tense energy as Blake entered. Conversation stopped abruptly, all eyes turning to the unexpected presence of Chicago's most controversial developer. About 30 people sat in folding chairs arranged in a semicircle, former residents of Westbrook Commons, now scattered across Chicago's struggling neighborhoods. Angela Reyes, a dignified woman in her 50s, approached him. "You actually came." "I said I would," Blake replied, conscious of the hostility radiating from the gathered residents. "Folks, this is Blake Harrington," Angela announced. "He's here to listen to our stories. No recordings, no press, just talking face to face." *4. The next 3 hours, Blake did exactly that. Listened as resident after resident described the impact of displacement on their lives. An elderly man who'd lost access to his medical providers when forced to move across town. A single mother whose children had to change schools mid-year, derailing their academic progress. A carpenter who lost his workshop, and with it, his livelihood. What struck Blake most wasn't just the financial hardship, though that was significant. It was the dissolution of community. The support networks, friendships, and neighborhood bonds shattered when Westbrook was demolished. "We weren't just losing apartments," Angela explained. "We were losing our safety net. The neighbor who watched your kids when you worked late, the retired nurse who checked on the elderly, the community garden where we grew food to supplement tight budgets." Blake had never considered these dimensions of displacement. In corporate presentations, relocations were clinical data points. Units cleared, compensation disbursed, development timelines maintained. The human ecosystem destroyed in the process had been entirely invisible to him. "I can't undo what happened," Blake acknowledged when everyone had spoken, "but I'm committed to making meaningful restitution, not just financial compensation, but helping rebuild what was lost." "Pretty words," a young man called out, "but your company's already walking back the promises you made. We've seen the press releases about revised compensation plans." "That's why I'm here as an individual, not as a corporate representative," Blake explained. "I'm establishing a separate foundation, funded from my personal assets, specifically to address community restoration. I'd like your association to have a governing role in determining how those resources are allocated." Angela looked skeptical. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A $10 million initial commitment," Blake stated, "focused on 4 areas: housing assistance, education support, healthcare access, and small business restoration. The foundation would be independently governed, with majority representation from affected communities." The room fell silent, the residents exchanging stunned glances. "Why should we believe you?" Angela finally asked. "Why the change of heart after years of ignoring our attempts to communicate?" Blake considered his answer carefully. The full truth about finding Lily, about Sarah's condition, felt too personal to share with strangers. "But these people deserved honesty. I've spent 20 years believing that progress meant tearing down the old to build something better," he began. "I never stopped to consider who defined better, or who paid the price for that so-called progress. Recent events forced me to see the human cost of decisions I made, from the isolation of boardrooms and luxury offices." He paused, gathering his thoughts. I'm not asking for forgiveness or redemption. I'm simply trying to address harms I helped create. Whether you choose to work with me or not, the foundation will proceed. The funds will be placed in an irrevocable trust within the week. Asterisk. The meeting continued for another hour, the conversation shifting from recrimination to cautious discussion of practical needs and potential programs. No consensus was reached, but Angela agreed to present the proposal to the wider association membership and continue the dialogue. Asterisk. As Blake prepared to leave, an elderly woman who had remained silent throughout the meeting approached him. My grandson has asthma, she said without preamble. Got much worse after we moved to the new place. Mold in the walls. When he can't breathe at night, I sit up with him wondering if this is the time we'll need to call an ambulance we can't afford. Asterisk. Blake waited, sensing she had more to say. Money. Helps, but it doesn't fix everything, she continued. What we need is for people like you to see people like us as human beings, not obstacles to your next big project. You're right, Blake said simply, and I can't promise to fix a system I helped create, but I can promise to try. Asterisk. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded once. We'll see. Asterisk. The encounter left Blake profoundly unsettled as he drove back across the city. The foundation was a start, but the elderly woman's words highlighted the limitations of even the most well-intentioned remediation efforts. Some harms couldn't be undone with money or programs. They required fundamental changes to the systems that enabled them in the first place. Asterisk. Blake, quote, phone rang. Dr. Chen from the hospital. Mr. Harrington, you need to come immediately. Sarah Watson is showing signs of emerging consciousness. Asterisk. Blake made it to Chicago Memorial in record time, racing through corridors until he reached Sarah's room. Dr. Chen met him outside. She's not fully conscious, but she's responding more consistently to verbal commands. Squeezing hands on request, tracking movement with her eyes. These are significant improvements. Does Lily know? We've contacted Miss Abernathy. She's bringing her now. Asterisk. Inside the room, a neurologist was conducting tests, asking Sarah to blink once for yes, twice for no. Her responses were slow but deliberate. Sarah, do you know where you are? The doctor asked. Asterisk. 1 blink. Yes. Are you in pain? Asterisk. 2 blinks. No. Do you remember what happened to you? Asterisk. A long pause, then 2 blinks. Asterisk. The doctor turned to Blake. This is very encouraging, but please understand we're still early in the process. Recovery from traumatic brain injury is rarely linear or complete. Asterisk. Lily arrived minutes later, bursting into the room with Miss Abernathy close behind. Mom! Mom! She rushed to the bedside, hesitating just before touching Sarah's hand. Can I hold her hand? Will it hurt her? It won't hurt her, the doctor assured her. In fact, familiar touch is beneficial. Asterisk. Lily carefully placed her small hand in her mother's. Mom, it's me, Lily. Can you hear me? Sarah's fingers twitched, then slowly curled around her daughter's hand. A single tear slipped from the corner of her eye. She knows it's me, Lily exclaimed. She's holding my hand. Asterisk. Blake watched from the doorway, reluctant to intrude on their reunion. Sarah's eyes shifted, scanning the room until they landed on him. Something flickered in her gaze. Recognition, perhaps, or confusion. Blake has been taking care of me, Mom, Lily explained, following her mother's line of sight. He's been really nice. He takes me to school and makes sure I eat vegetables and everything. Sarah's eyes remained fixed on Blake, her expression unreadable in her still limited mobility. Asterisk. Dr. Chen gently suggested they not overwhelm Sarah with too much stimulation. Short periods of interaction are best for now. Will gradually increase as she continues to improve. Asterisk. In the hallway, the neurologist provided a more detailed assessment. Miss Watson is showing remarkable progress, but there's a long road ahead. She'll need extensive rehabilitation, physical, occupational, and speech therapy, and there may be cognitive and emotional challenges we can't yet assess. Whatever she needs, Blake assured them, his standard response becoming something of a mantra. Asterisk. Later that evening, After bringing Lily home for dinner and homework, Blake received another call that shifted the trajectory of his increasingly complicated situation. Michael Prentice, his attorney, sounded uncharacteristically agitated. The DA is moving forward with charges against Parker, Coleman, and potentially others in connection with Sarah Watson's accident. They want you to come in for questioning. As her witness. They're not specifying. My contact in the prosecutor's office indicates they're exploring conspiracy charges that could extend beyond the direct perpetrators. Blake absorbed this news. When? Tomorrow morning. And Blake, this is serious. If they can establish any knowledge or tacit approval of tactics used against problematic residents, you could be facing criminal charges. The implication was clear. Blake's public campaign for accountability had painted a target on his own back. Those seeking to protect themselves, like Parker and Coleman, would have every incentive to implicate him in their actions. I'll be there, Blake said. And Michael, no evasive tactics. I'll answer their questions directly and honestly. The attorney sighed. That approach carries significant risks. So does continuing to evade responsibility, Blake replied. I've done enough of that. After. Hanging up, Blake found Lily in the guest room that had gradually become hers, arranging family photos on the dresser, pictures she'd brought from her apartment. Is everything okay? She asked, showing the perceptiveness that still caught him off guard. Just some business things to take care of tomorrow, Blake said, sidestepping the full truth. Hey, I had an idea. Since your mum is doing better, maybe we could decorate her hospital room, make it less hospital-y. Lily brightened. Could we bring her yellow flowers? She loves yellow. Absolutely. And maybe some photos like these, things that will make her happy when she's more awake. They spent the evening selecting photos and making colorful cards for Sarah's room. Blake marveled at how seamlessly Lily had adapted to life in his penthouse, how she'd carved out her own space in his formerly sterile, impersonal home. Children were remarkably resilient, he reflected, though he wondered what invisible scars she might carry from the upheaval of recent years. The following morning, Blake met with prosecutors at the district attorney's office downtown. The questioning was exactly as Prentice had warned, focused on establishing Blake's knowledge of and involvement in tactics used against residents who resisted relocation. Mr. Harrington, were you aware that Richard Coleman maintained a special handling protocol for persistent complainants from Westbrook Commons? Assistant DA Ramirez asked. I was aware of security protocols for restricting access to executive floors, Blake answered carefully. I did not authorize harassment or intimidation of former residents. Yet you signed a memo specifically directing that complaints from these individuals be ignored. How would you characterize that action? As negligent and wrongful, Blake admitted. I routinely sign documents presented by legal without adequate review. That doesn't excuse my responsibility, but it explains how such directives were approved, without my full understanding of their implications. The questioning continued for hours, covering everything from corporate policies to specific incidents involving Westbrook residents. Blake maintained his commitment to honest answers, even when Prentice signaled caution. Mr. Harrington, Ramirez said toward the end, you've been surprisingly forthcoming today. Most executives in your position would hide behind lawyers and selective memory. I'm trying to make amends, Blake replied simply. That requires honesty, however uncomfortable, even if that honesty leads to criminal charges. Blake met her gaze directly. Even then. As they left the DA's office, Prentice was unusually quiet. Finally, in the privacy of the car, he spoke. You've placed yourself in serious jeopardy today. They're building a case that portrays Harrington Developments as a criminal enterprise, with you at its head. Do they have evidence that I knew about or ordered the hit and run? No, but they're constructing a narrative of a corporate culture that tacitly encouraged extreme measures against obstacles. Your signature on those memos gives their theory credibility. Blake absorbed this information. What's your assessment of the probability of charges? Against you personally, 50-50. They'll want someone higher than Parker and Coleman to satisfy public outrage. You're the obvious target. Asterisk rather. Then returning to the penthouse, Blake directed the driver to Chicago Memorial. The hospital had become a kind of sanctuary, a place where the complex legal and financial challenges receded, replaced by the simpler, more fundamental priorities of Sarah's recovery and Lily's well-being. Asterisk. He found Sarah's room transformed. Lily and Miss Abernathy had arrived earlier with the decorations they'd prepared, yellow flowers in simple vases, family photos taped to the walls, colorful drawings surrounding the bed. Sarah was sitting up slightly, supported by adjustable pillows, her eyes more alert than Blake had yet seen them. "Blake!" Lily called out when she spotted him. "Mom can talk a little bit now. Show him, Mom." Sarah's gaze shifted to Blake, that same unreadable expression crossing her face. Her voice, when it came, was raspy and labored but intelligible. "You're the man who took our home." Asterisk. The simple statement hung in the air. Lily looked confused, glancing between her mother and Blake. "What does she mean?" Lily asked. Asterisk. Blake moved to Sarah's bedside, meeting her eyes directly. "Yes, my company was responsible for displacing you from Westbrook Commons and for failing to provide the compensation you were owed." Sarah's eyes never left his face. "Why are you helping us now?" Asterisk. It was the question at the heart of everything, one Blake had asked himself repeatedly over the past weeks. "Because I finally saw the real impact of my actions," he answered honestly. "Not statistics on a spreadsheet, but actual lives affected. Your life. Lily's life." Sarah's gaze shifted to her daughter, then back to Blake. "She trusts you." "I'm trying to be worthy of that trust," Blake said quietly. Asterisk. A nurse entered to check Sarah's vitals, providing a welcome interruption to the charged moment. While the nurse worked, Blake stepped into the hallway with Miss Abernathy. "Sarah's cognition seems remarkably intact," the social worker observed. "Yes," Blake agreed, "though I imagine this is just the beginning of a long recovery process." Asterisk. Mr. Harrington, I should inform you that with Miss Watson regaining consciousness and communication abilities, the temporary guardianship situation will need to be re-evaluated. Asterisk. Blake had anticipated this. Of course, Sarah's wishes regarding Lily's care must take priority now. "She may need assistance herself for some time," Miss Abernathy noted. "The rehabilitation process could take months or even years." "Whatever support they need will be provided," Blake assured her. "Housing, medical care, childcare, financial assistance, everything." Asterisk. Ms. Abernathy studied him curiously. "May I speak candidly, Mr. Harrington? Your commitment to this family goes beyond ordinary corporate responsibility or even guilt. You've developed a genuine attachment to Lily." Asterisk. Blake didn't deny it. "She's an extraordinary child." "Yes, she is. But you should prepare yourself for the possibility that as Sarah recovers, she may want to re-establish independence for herself and her daughter, away from your influence." Asterisk. The thought created an unexpected pain in Blake's chest, but he nodded. "That would be her right. My only concern is their well-being." Asterisk. When Blake returned to the room, Lily was reading to her mother from a children's book. Sarah's eyes were heavy with fatigue, but focused intently on her daughter. The scene, mother and child reconnecting after their traumatic separation, was both beautiful and poignant. Asterisk. Blake hung back, suddenly feeling like an intruder. This was their moment, their reunion. His role in their lives had always been temporary, a circumstantial intervention rather than a permanent fixture. Asterisk. As if sensing his thoughts, Sarah's eyes shifted to him once more. With visible effort, she formed her next words carefully. "Thank you, Tao, for taking care of her." Asterisk. The simple acknowledgement, coming from the woman whose life had been so profoundly impacted by his company's actions, affected Blake deeply. "It's been my privilege," he replied truthfully. Asterisk. Later that afternoon, as Lily continued her visit with Sarah, Blake stepped outside to take a call from Angela Reyes. "The association met last night," she informed him. "We've decided to accept your foundation proposal with some modifications to the governance structure. We want a legally binding framework that can't be altered without community approval." "That's entirely reasonable," Blake agreed. "Have your attorneys draft what you need." "There's something else," Angela continued. "We've been contacted by the district attorney's office. They want statements from former residents regarding corporate practices during the Westbrook relocation." Blake understood the implication. Resident testimony about harassment, intimidation, or neglect would strengthen the case against Harrington Developments and potentially against him personally. "You should cooperate fully," he said after a moment. "Tell the truth about what happened." "Even if that hurts your case?" "The truth is what matters now," Blake replied. "No more covering up or looking the other way." After hanging up, Blake sat on a bench in the hospital courtyard, contemplating the converging threads of his unraveling life. The professional consequences were already manifest. His resignation, the company's distancing itself from his new values, the collapse of business relationships built over decades. Now legal jeopardy loomed as well, with the very real possibility of criminal charges. His personal reputation lay in tatters, with former associates abandoning him and the press portraying him alternately as a hypocrite, a villain, or a man suffering a midlife crisis. Yet amid this disintegration of his former life, something new had emerged, something genuine and meaningful. His connection with Lily, his commitment to making amends, not just with words but with concrete actions, the foundation for displaced residents. Sarah's ongoing care. For the first time in his adult life, Blake Harrington was making decisions based not on profit or status, but on human impact. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had found his moral compass only after his ethical failures had caused irreparable harm. As the sun began to set over Chicago's skyline, Blake watched medical staff changing shifts, families visiting loved ones, life continuing in its imperfect, resilient way. Whatever came next, legal charges, financial setbacks, public condemnation, he would face it with the clarity of purpose that had been missing from his life for too long. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Mom's sleeping now. Can we go get dinner? I'm starving." Blake smiled, typing back a reply. "Absolutely. Meet you at the elevator in 5 minutes." Some things were simple, after all. Chapter 7. The Redemption. 6 months later, the small house in Evanston glowed, with autumn light filtering through newly installed windows. The modest property, 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a backyard with space for a garden, sat on a quiet street lined with mature maple trees just beginning to show their fall colors. It was nothing like Blake's luxury penthouse, but that was precisely the point. In the kitchen, Sarah Watson practiced her physical therapy exercises while preparing lunch, her movements deliberate but increasingly fluid. The months of rehabilitation had yielded remarkable progress, from halting speech and limited mobility to near normal function with only occasional fatigue and some persistent weakness on her right side. "Lily, lunch in 15 minutes, she called toward the backyard where her daughter was helping Blake plant bulbs for spring flowers. The domestic scene would have been unimaginable half a year earlier. So much had changed since that day in the hospital when Sarah had first acknowledged Blake's role in their displacement. The conversation that followed, after Lily had fallen asleep in a chair by her mother's bed, had been difficult but necessary. "I tried to reach you," Sarah had said, her voice stronger than earlier but still bearing the marks of her injury. 17 times over 2 years. "I know," Blake had replied. "I've seen the records. There's no excuse for how you were treated." "It wasn't just the money," Sarah had continued. "It was being treated like we didn't matter, like our lives were disposable." Those words had stayed with Blake through everything that followed. The criminal charges against Douglas Parker and Richard Coleman, the civil lawsuits against Harrington Developments, the establishment of the Community Restoration Foundation, and Blake's own legal battles. In the end, Blake had avoided criminal charges through a controversial immunity deal. He provided extensive testimony about corporate practices in exchange for protection from prosecution. The decision had drawn criticism from those who believed he deserved punishment alongside his associates, but prosecutors had deemed his cooperation more valuable than his conviction. The civil consequences had been substantial, however. Blake had surrendered most of his remaining Harrington development stock and paid millions in personal settlements. The company he'd built had distanced itself entirely from him, rebranding under new leadership, with ostentatious commitments to ethical development, commitments Blake viewed with skepticism but hoped would be honored. Through it all, his relationship with Sarah and Lily had evolved in unexpected ways. As Sarah's recovery progressed, Blake had helped them find and purchase this house in Evanston, close to excellent schools for Lily and quality rehabilitation facilities for Sarah, but away from the shadows of downtown towers that held too many difficult memories. The purchase had been structured as part of Sarah's settlement, with the property placed solely in her name to ensure her independence. Blake had similarly established a trust for Lily's education and future needs, controlled exclusively by Sarah, but with Blake serving as advisory trustee. These arrangements preserved Sarah's autonomy while acknowledging the ongoing connection that had formed between them all, a connection none had anticipated, but which had gradually cautiously deepened over months of shared challenges. Blake looked up from the flower bed where he and Lily had been working. "Lunchtime," he told her. "Go wash up." "But we're not done with the tulips," Lily protested, holding up another bulb. "They'll still be here after lunch," Blake promised. "Your mum needs to rest after her exercises." Lily nodded, understanding the routines of recovery that had become part of their lives. "Race you inside," she challenged, already sprinting toward the back door. Inside, Sarah was setting the table, moving with the careful deliberation that marked all her physical activities now. Blake resisted the urge to help. She had been clear about her desire to regain independence, and he respected her determination even when it was difficult to watch her struggle. "The garden's coming along," he commented, washing his hands at the kitchen sink. "Lily has strong opinions about flower placement." Sarah smiled. "She gets that from me. Everything in its proper place." The three settled at the table for the simple meal, soup and sandwiches, with apple slices arranged in a fan pattern on Lily's plate. These ordinary domestic moments had become precious to Blake, a far cry from the business lunches and catered meetings that once filled his days. "I have news," Sarah said as they ate. "The community center offered me a position managing their after-school program, part-time to start, but potentially full-time once I'm further along in my recovery." "Mom, that's awesome!" Lily exclaimed. "Congratulations," Blake added sincerely. "They're lucky to have you." Sarah's eyes held quiet. Pride. It feels good to be moving forward, to be building something rather than just recovering. The subtext was clear. Sarah Watson was reclaiming her life step by deliberate step. Her journey from cleaning offices at night to program management represented not just physical recovery, but a profound life transformation, one enabled by the settlement funds but achieved through her own determination. After lunch, Lily returned to her homework while Sarah rested. Blake took the opportunity to update her on the Foundation's latest projects. "The small business incubator is ready to launch," he explained, showing her the plans on his tablet. 5 former Westbrook residents will receive startup funding and mentorship to re-establish businesses they lost during displacement. Sarah reviewed the materials with the careful attention she brought to everything. The childcare component is crucial. Many couldn't maintain businesses previously because of childcare costs. "Angela suggested that," Blake acknowledged, referring to Angela Reyes, who now served as the Foundation's executive director. "She's been instrumental in identifying the real barriers these entrepreneurs face." Their conversation was interrupted. by Blake's phone ringing, his attorney, Michael Prentice. "Excuse me," Blake said, stepping into the living room to take the call. "Michael, what's up?" "The board voted this morning," Prentice informed him. "They've accepted the terms of your separation agreement. You're officially divested from Harrington Developments with the agreed-upon settlement distribution." Blake felt a complex mixture of emotions, the final severing of ties with the company that had defined his professional identity for 2 decades. And the ethical development protocols? Embedded in the corporate charter as stipulated, they can't be altered without a supermajority vote. "Good," Blake said simply. Another chapter closed. After hanging up, Blake found Sarah watching him from the kitchen doorway. "Everything okay?" "Yes, just finalizing some business matters." Sarah studied him with the perceptiveness that had initially surprised Blake, but which he now understood as central to her character. "You've given up a lot these past months." Blake shook his head. "I've gained far more than I've lost." The statement wasn't mere sentiment. His former life, the wealth, status, and power he had accumulated, now seemed hollow compared to the authentic connections and purposeful work that filled his days. The Foundation's community projects, his ongoing support for families impacted by development, his evolving relationship with Sarah and Lily. Later that afternoon, Blake left for his small office downtown, where he now worked consulting with community organizations on equitable development projects. His expertise in real estate remained valuable, but was now directed toward empowering communities rather than displacing them. As he prepared to leave, Lily emerged from her room. "Are you coming back for dinner?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Blake and Sarah had been careful to maintain appropriate boundaries as their relationship evolved. He had his own apartment nearby, and they balanced family time with necessary separation. "Not tonight," Blake replied. "I have a meeting that will run late, but I'll see you tomorrow for the science fair, right?" Lily nodded, then surprised him with a quick hug before returning to her room. Sarah appeared in the hallway. "She's attached to you," she observed, quietly. "It's been good for her to have a stable male presence after everything." "She's an amazing kid," Blake said. "You've done an incredible job raising her, especially considering the obstacles." Sarah acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Blake, there's something we should discuss. About the future." Her serious tone made Blake pause. "Of course, is everything all right?" "Yes, better than all right, actually." She gestured toward the living room. "Can we sit for a moment?" They settled on the sofa, Sarah turning slightly to face him directly. "These past months have been complicated," she began. "When I first realized who you were, the man whose company had taken our home, I couldn't imagine feeling anything but anger toward you." Blake nodded, waiting for her to continue. "But watching how you've been with Lily, seeing the changes you've made, the sacrifices..." Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. "I've come to believe that people can genuinely transform, not just saying the right things, but actually becoming different." "I'm still learning," Blake admitted, "still making mistakes." "We all are," Sarah replied. "The question is what we do afterward." She looked down at her hands, then back up at Blake. "Lily asked me something this morning. She wanted to know if you could live here with us, permanently." Blake felt his heart rate quicken. "What did you tell her?" "That it wasn't that simple, that adults need time to figure these things out." Sarah's eyes held his steadily. "But I've been thinking about it too." The air between them seemed too still. "Sarah, I care about you both deeply," Blake said carefully, "but I would never want to rush anything or assume." "I know," she interrupted gently, "and I appreciate how respectful you've been about giving me space and independence. That's partly why I think maybe we could explore what comes next, together." The simple statement contained worlds of possibility, a future Blake had privately longed for, but had been careful not to presume or pressure. "I would like that very much," he replied simply, "at whatever pace feels right for you and Lily." Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face in a way that still caught Blake off guard with its quiet beauty. One step at a time, then. Asterisk. As Blake drove to his office, the conversation replayed in his mind. The past 6 months had been a journey of atonement and transformation. But what Sarah was suggesting was something different. Not just making amends for past wrongs, but building something new and genuine together. Asterisk. His phone buzzed with a text from Angela Reyes. Channel 7 wants to interview you about the Foundation's first anniversary. Thoughts? Asterisk. Blake had maintained a low profile with the media, preferring to let the Foundation's work speak for itself. But perhaps it was time to address the public narrative more directly. Set it up, he replied, but include some of the families we've helped. Their stories matter most. Asterisk. At his modest office, a far cry from the executive suite he once commanded, Blake reviewed applications for the Foundation's next round of housing assistance grants. Each file represented a family affected by development practices like those his former company had employed, families displaced, undercompensated, or otherwise harmed by the relentless march of progress. Asterisk. A knock at his door interrupted his review. Marcus, his former executive assistant, who had chosen to join Blake in his new venture despite the significant pay cut, entered with coffee. The Westside Community Council called, Marcus informed him. They've accepted your proposal to convert the abandoned warehouse into affordable housing. They want to meet next week to discuss implementation. That's excellent news, Blake replied. The project would transform a derelict property into homes for families being displaced by another luxury development, a small but meaningful counterbalance to the gentrification reshaping Chicago's neighborhoods. Also, the district attorney's office sent over the final deposition schedule for the Parker case. They need you on the 15th. Asterisk. Blake nodded. Douglas Parker's trial was approaching, the culmination of months of investigation into the hit and run that had nearly taken Sarah's life. Blake's testimony would be crucial to establishing the corporate culture that had enabled such actions. One more thing, Marcus added. Victoria Sheldon called. She says the new board is already trying to work around the ethical development protocols, looking for loopholes. Asterisk. Blake wasn't surprised. Corporate culture didn't change overnight, and the pressures of profit would continually push against ethical constraints. Forward her call to Angela at the Foundation. She'll know how to apply appropriate public pressure. Asterisk. The remainder of the afternoon passed in meetings and planning sessions for upcoming projects. By evening, Blake felt the familiar satisfaction of meaningful work, so different from the hollow achievements that had once driven him. Asterisk. On his drive home, Blake detoured through the former Westbrook Commons site, now transformed into The Heights, luxury residential complex, with prices far beyond the reach of the families who had once called the area home. The gleaming towers and manicured grounds represented everything his former company had valued: exclusive, profitable, impressive. Asterisk. Yet Blake no longer saw success in the polished facade. Instead, he saw absence, the missing community, the displaced lives, the lost connections. This awareness didn't erase his responsibility for what had happened, but it confirmed how profoundly his perspective had changed. Asterisk. His phone rang, Lily's ringtone. Blake! Guess what? I got picked for the science team. We're going to the state competition. Asterisk. Her excitement was contagious, and Blake found himself smiling broadly. That's amazing, Lily. Your volcano project must have impressed them. Mom says we can celebrate with ice cream after dinner. Can you come? Asterisk. Blake checked the time. His meeting had ended earlier than expected. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Asterisk. As he turned his car around, heading toward the small house in Evanston that had come to feel more like home than his luxury penthouse ever had, Blake reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 6 months. Asterisk. He had lost his company, most of his fortune, his professional reputation, and the respect of peers who viewed his transformation as betrayal or weakness. By any conventional measure, Blake Harrington had fallen dramatically from the heights of success. Asterisk. Yet in that falling, he had found something his wealth and power had never provided: